It's 6:31. We will start. Absent tonight. Julie notified us ahead of time. Joseph is amongst the missing, and Brooke is on her way.
I'm here.
Oh, you did.
I made it.
And we're all.
Quorum count is 14.
Brooke is
So it's, the quorum is 14 of 16. And we added audience with the public to the agenda, but nobody signed up to speak. So we will move on. And we will start off with Madomic Valley High School.
Yeah, I just need a minute to.
Whoops, go ahead. You want to mention? Sorry, I forgot to have Karen update the board on you.
I just wanted to log in so I could present
Okay.
this budget, that's all. Sorry, Linda.
That's okay.
Now I'm trying to present the middle school budget. Great, I'm ready.
Okay, Linda, when you're ready.
Okay. Good evening. First, and as always, I thank you for the opportunity to be the principal of Madomic Valley High School. It is my great pleasure to work with Assistant Principals Matthew Carlson and Maida Cordero and Athletic Director Matthew Lash on a daily basis in attending to all the responsibilities of our positions that are sometimes too unpredictable to even believe. It has been particularly heartwarming for me in that while I was out getting the bionic knee, I'm not ready to do a jig yet, but I'm getting there. Not only did these people step it up even further, but Steve and Karen Brackett and Tom and Casey helped out. And it's hard to have a job and go through that kind of outage and feel like you're just putting other people in misery because of your own situation. So I'm very grateful to be through that and to have the support of all of those people. There is no other school in the county, the state, the country, or the world where I would serve as principal. I say that a lot. I'm not in this job to be a principal. I came into this job to be the principal at Madomic Valley High School, and that's where I'm supposed to be, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful for the ability to serve the community that has my heart, that I have been in for such a long time, and my family before that. It's 1958 that my dad started working at Waldoboro High School, and there's been somebody in the family, in the district, all of that time, which has been me. At recent board meetings, I know that you have heard details about the academic, athletic, and dramatic successes of our school. If you are a Facebook user, I encourage you to search for and follow Madomic Valley High School's page, where students in advanced photography daily create visually appealing posts about all the events at our school to get the good news out there. I don't know, maybe some of you are Insta folks as well. They do Insta. I don't do Insta, but I know that that's out there. We are not perfect, but we continuously work to meet goals that we have set for improvement, and we will continue to do so for the benefit of all the students we serve. When it comes to the high school's budget, I have sought to be fiscally responsible every year for the year since the budget became mine to do, by shifting funds for necessities each year and making reductions where they make sense. And I have done the same this year. If you start with the cover page, you will note the projected enrollment. And certainly when I started at Madomic in 2005, we had over 700 students. So there's been a reduction there, and we have already been losing staff for quite some time at Madomic because of the numbers. And so if you were to look at the fine arts department in 2005, I think at that time when I started, it had maybe 8 or 9 teachers in the fine arts department that included auto tech and woodworking and those kinds of things. And now we have 3.5. So we've already been responding to the needs of our community with the changes in our population. You will notice the requested line in world languages goes from 2.1 to 2. And if you will remember, I had the one social studies teacher who was teaching one section of American Sign Language. That has gone away with her retirement. So it drops the requested to world language for two teachers. And it changes the social studies, just bumps that back up to 5 instead of 4.9. Do you have any questions about that? There isn't anything else on that cover page that is different from what it was before. So turning the page again, we have the staffing. And there are some needs in a couple of places that are identified in red. Custodial positions. And it looks like that's it for right now. If you turn to the next page with the infamous gold and white lines, I have kept my white lines to either not increase at all or to decrease. In travel reimbursement, we looked at that and we didn't use that full amount of $2,200, so we took that down 1,000. The only other white line piece, we looked at the communication and postage piece. We brought that down. And you will notice on my detail that there is a cost for NEASC of $4,000 that we have put on the items required by law on the cover sheet for the budget. We've moved that out of my budget and into there. Boy, he is big. I don't know if you saw that fly. You blacked out there for a minute. We are going to have to pay for some people to come to review us, and it'll be anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 a couple of times. We're unsure right now if that will happen in the spring of next year or the fall of the next year, falling into the next budget. So that's why we took it out of mine and put it with the request for that required by law, so that that money is a little bit more flexible. Is that a good way to describe it, Karen?
Yes, also it's a new requirement where it's not a yearly requirement.
Right.
How often are you?
Every 10 years this happens.
So that's why we put it on that list of new
Right.
asks, because it's been removed from our budget in prior years.
We did look at other ways to become accredited, and you have to be accredited. And the state does an accrediting process, NEASC does an accrediting process, and I decided to stay with the process that is familiar to us. We know how much it costs, we know how it works, and instead of trying something different, we decided to stay with NEASC to do the accrediting piece. And so that's coming up in the next two years. If you go over to the budget detail, it's like on page 9 of 10 where you see the NEASC amount listed there as it's just a dash. That's what was taken out and put in the general budget. And I come in at about $4,000 less than I did last year for the white lines that I'm responsible.
Linda, I want to apologize. I just realized when I did your budget, I did it before all your retirements came in. So
Yes.
the vacancies that are reflected in here were positions that were actually vacant when I did the budget, but I believe Linda has.
I have 5 retirements this
I
year.
did her teaching.
I have 5 retirements, and I believe at present time 1 resignation. The retirements occur in each of the content areas: fine arts, math, science, social studies, and English. And then I believe I have another position in math that will be opening up. So I started advertising for those positions about a month ago, and I've been following Frontline pretty closely. We do have applicants. We don't have a ton of applicants. For example, my highest one was social studies, which had 17 names, but when you actually get in there, which today I did, 11 of them haven't completed the application for whatever reason. So then that brings you down to 7 or 8, and then you look at those 7 and 8, and some of them have certification issues because they've not yet been certified in the state of Maine. And so you basically get down to about 4 or 5 people that are viable candidates for most. Math right now is at 2. What we are doing is that my academic coordinators, I'm giving them the names of incomplete applications and the numbers, and they're calling people to say, hey, notice you started, you didn't finish, are you still interested? Because we're looking for people.
Yeah, we
So
have a few more after today. I just.
yes, you just, right,
There were a number of about to graduate people who are
good.
very interested in this position.
Yes, and we also gained interest with a job fair that Maida Cudero and Ryan McNally attended 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we are not just sitting back waiting for it to happen. We're going out and trying to find people to come to us. That's, yes.
Maybe you already said this, but I'm still being asked on
On the dues and benefits.
that's just the yearly.
The dues and benefits is the yearly dues and benefits. I was going to say that, so thank you. We pay about $4,000 a year to be in NEAS for our dues, and then in the cycle, the 8 to 10 year time, you pay more to have people come. They have to stay overnight. They stay for 3 days one time and 3 more days another time, and so that's what that money is. But yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Can you explain, the virtual high school and Edmonton?
So Edmentum is, it was formerly known as Plato, and we, on average, about 3% of the credits that we issue are with students on Edmentum, which means that they come to school and they can sign up for either classes that they need to retake because they failed them, or classes that we don't offer, like cosmetology and veterinary technician. There's tons of them. And they go into the Student Achievement Center with Carolyn York, and she monitors their progress with the online learning. We no longer do online learning off campus. We tried that for 2 years during COVID, and that we realized was an undertaking that if you're going to take on online learning, that probably should be online learning where people stay home and participate and do their work. That requires a whole other realm of expertise and money and accountability. So we have students who come to school to get the Edmentum programs. And then virtual high school is the next layer up. Virtual high school is college courses. They are more expensive. It costs, I think, about $400 a piece, doesn't it, Nita? And they are led by a teacher, but still done online. But students can, if, like, for example, you can't fit in advanced placement economics, you could take advanced placement economics on virtual high school with a real teacher guiding you through and grading your work. So they are 2 options for online learning, the 2 options that we use, Brooke. Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions? Go ahead, Noah.
First off, it's really good to see how well you're getting around.
Thank you, I'm happy too. I won't do a jig though.
With the smaller projected freshman class coming in, do you see any issues with specific freshman-oriented classes as far as sizes wise?
No, and because with the current class that we have right now, with all due respect to them, there are students who are not passing those classes and they will need to retake classes again. So right now, it's going to hold fairly steady. But we're aware of that, but with the need that we have, the whole idea, and I just came up, I wish I brought it. I just came up with a basket of Easter eggs. And the Easter eggs are by color, and there are 24 of them in the basket, each one representing English 1, 2, 3, and 4, Math 1, 2, 3, and 4. Freshman students have no idea of what it takes and what it means to have to pass the classes to get a diploma. And the hard part is that by the time some of them figure it out, they only have 2 or 3 credits their freshman year, and they're already behind. And so I'm trying to find different ways to convey this to them. So I have this basket, and I talked about it with a student the other day, and the visual piece of that, he finally got it. I said, you have to pass all of these eggs, honey. You don't just get to come every 4th day and do something and get a pass. And his eyes just, he got it. We're trying to get freshmen to get that sooner so they're not behind the 8 ball at the end of their freshman year. So, but it isn't easy because we do have kind of an issue with K-8 education. And then you get to high school and all of a sudden the buck stops here and you need that or you don't get. And that's really hard for them to understand. Usually it kicks in, we determine it, usually, sometimes it's the middle of the sophomore year. Sometimes it's not to the end of the sophomore year. You've done 2 years of high school and you only have 5 credits. And that is a steep hill to climb.
Are they also getting freshman cycle?
We don't have that freshman study hall like we used to when we had freshman academy because we lost staff. And when you lose staff, you lose the ability to group them like that book. So, but since that time, we have a tutor, an ed tech who basically does tutoring, not just for special ed students, but for all of our students. We're working on peer mentorships. We're trying to do things that we can use the people in the school to help the students that are there achieve.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Lynn.
All right, then I will end as I do most Fridays with our roll the eye dad jokes or roll the eye jokes. What did one ocean say to the other? Nothing. They just waved. And I also say to the students every Friday, may you be safe, may you be wise, and may you be well. And my thinking is that even if they don't remember the old lady principal that was their principal, they can say, remember that person that used to say every Friday, may you be safe, may you be wise, may you be well. I don't think that's too bad of a thing to remember. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have improvement of instruction.
Good evening, board.
Good evening.
So I have a lot to talk about. And I have a feeling that this particular area of the budget tonight is going to be a very different presentation than any that the board has heard before. In part because you have a new person doing it, but in part because there's stuff going on in the climate in which we live that really hits this area of the budget hard. So what I'd like to do first, if you don't mind, I know we all want to go home at a reasonable hour, but I thought it might be worth kind of explaining the big picture as I see it before I get down into the weeds and the budget items. So obviously what I'm talking about is the federal money and what happens to it. So at the last board meeting, I explained that even before the uncertainty about federal funding that has come up because the president and the governor have gotten into a scuffle, there was word coming out to people who manage federal money for schools, my spy network, if you will, that we should anticipate big reductions, but there was nothing more than just sort of like, how much? How much do you think? Nobody has a clear example. So I talked to some colleagues in other districts, and the best guidance that we could come up with is that we should probably plan for at least a 25% reduction in Title I, which is the really big one, and potentially a 100% reduction in all the other titles. And in my board report, which you recently saw, I've tried to explain in fairly accessible language what those titles are for. They are all for different things. You can't necessarily swap the money from one to the others.
In some cases you can, but not in all cases. So I need to talk mostly about Title I. Title I is specifically for kids in poverty. So we have some of those. And so we get a big chunk of Title I money, and we, historically that has been a relatively consistent amount. And now what we're looking at is complete uncertainty about what that amount will be. So the predicament that we have had is, okay, maybe there's no federal money. That is a threat that's looming out there. Maybe there is none. Do we want to plan for that now while we are working on the budget? When we can play with the budget? Or do we want to see how this plays out and then maybe make adjustments down the line? Now, the timeline for finding out normally, and I don't know if we can count on things being normal, is that in April, the school district is told by the state what our federal allocation will be. And then, once we get an amount, so the way this title money works is that the federal government gives it to the state. The state is actually the primary beneficiary. And then the state allocates the money to sub-beneficiaries. We are a sub-beneficiary, as is every other school district. So we get an amount, and then somebody like me has to write our grant to tell the state how we want to spend that money. And the state will look over the grant proposal and decide if it is up to snuff. And then they'll either approve it or not. That grant proposal, I have to submit it to the state by the end of July. So we get kind of an idea of how much money total there is sometime in April. Then we have several months to write the grant. And the grant, that's time when we look at what we need. So now I want to tell you about some of the rules that have to be followed in writing the grant, specifically for Title I. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I want you to understand the really big ones. So the first really big one is there is a rule called supplement, not supplant. And what that means is we can't use Title I money for something that we have to do anyway, and that we're not spending our own money on. So for example, let's say we need a kindergarten teacher in one of the schools that would only have one kindergarten teacher. We can't hire that one kindergarten teacher with Title I money because we have to use our own money first. Does that make sense? And then if we want something else to supplement that thing we've already done for ourselves, we can potentially use Title I money for that. So that's one of the rules we have to follow in writing grant. The other one that we have to honor is the rank and distribution requirement. And here's what that means. When I fill out the grant, one of the last sections in the grant is to rank our schools by the level of poverty in each school, the number of kids who are living in poverty. So in our district right now, the #1 school of children living in poverty is Millard, and second is Warren. And then on down, I can't remember on down the line. So that is very important because you have to proportionally allocate this money in a way that honors that rank and distribution. So we can't just decide we're getting X amount from the state and we want to fund a big, big new thing at the high school. We can't do that. We can't just do that. We have to follow these rules. So one thing we are allowed to do, and which has been done in this district for quite a while, is we are allowed to prioritize one grade span over the other grade spans. By grade span, I mean elementary, middle, or high school. So where we are right now is that for a while, the title money has been allocated to elementary schools. We decided that's where we're putting our title money. And that's what I'm proposing we still do. The second thing is then, all right, so we're in the elementary schools. Now we have to follow the rank and distribution, which means, if you're following, we have to prioritize which two schools, Miller and Warren. So then, we can't just give Miller and Warren an equal amount of money because we have to follow another rule. Well, it's the same rule, it's that rank and distribution rule, we have to give the money proportionally based on the number of students that are in poverty. So we can't just split it down the middle. We have to take the number of students in Miller that live in poverty, and then the number of students in Warren that live in poverty, and divide the money proportionally based on that. Does that make sense? Okay, so I have some numbers on that for you, just for your reference. So one of the other things to consider is staff-to-student ratio. So in order to get federal money, the maximum allowable staff-to-student ratio is 11.02 staff members to 1 in a school. So right now at Miller, we are at 10.01 to 1. And in Warren, we are at 9.36 to 1. So those are relatively equal. That is fine. It's a little bit lower at Warren than it is at Miller. So these are all things to consider, right? So now what we've had to do is think, okay, if we're going to reduce this federal money, we have to reduce it in those, we have to follow those rules when we reduce it. Does that make sense? We can't just decide we're going to cut everything from Warren or cut everything from Miller. It has to be distributed proportionally between those two schools. So when I get into the weeds, I feel that that's important for you to understand. Those are some of the rules that I'm trying to honor in what I'm proposing. There are some other things then that we are considering in the potential loss of the federal money. So what we as an agency have done is taken a look at things that are in federal money right now and try to decide if it's all lost, what can we really not live without? What are the most important things? And what I'm proposing for the moment, knowing that we should have a clearer picture in April, is that those things that are most important, we put into the general fund, because if we lose the federal money, we really need to find a way to keep them going. We may find in April that we have something to work with, and I would say those will be the first things to go back in to the federal money. So can I explain that anymore before I move on? That gets kind of complicated, so I want to make sure that people understand that. Otherwise, it really probably looks as if I'm suggesting we just throw a lot of stuff into the general fund, which is not an inexhaustible amount of money. But what I am trying to say is, if we have choices to make, this is what I'm saying we should prioritize. And let's hope for the best, plan for the worst, and hope for the best. So some of those things, I would say the biggest one that I really hope you'll consider is what we're doing for McKinney-Vento students. So Nancy is our McKinney-Vento coordinator. We used to be the principal at Prescott School. And we have been using Title I money and also some Title V money. Title V is for rural school districts to basically flesh out our McKinney-Vento program. I've been trying to put a lot in my board reports about McKinney-Vento because I can't overstate how this area of our district's efforts and every district's efforts has been growing in importance. It probably seems to people now, it seems this way to me. There's this McKinney-Vento stuff coming from the past few years. The truth is the McKinney-Vento law was passed in the 1980s. It's a federal law. It was a bipartisan law named for McKinney and Vento. I forget their first names, but they were Congress people. One was a Republican, one was a Democrat. They both felt that it was important to maintain continuity for kids who end up in a situation of homelessness during the school year. That's really the point of all of these. That's really the point of the law. It's like if a kid loses their housing in the middle of the school year and then they have to go move in with Grammy, who happens to live in the next district, that they don't have to get uprooted from school or go to the next district. And McKinney-Vento also has a definition. It has a checklist that we follow to determine, not just we, it's every school district in the country, to determine whether a kid qualifies as experiencing homelessness. It isn't just the definition that might pop into your head. It's actually all kinds of things. if a kid is doubled up with a family member or a friend, like if they're couch surfing, there's a lot of high school kids that might apply to. If they are living in substandard housing, like they don't have heat, they don't have utilities, they don't have, they have a infestation of some kind, any of those things could qualify them for McKinney-Vento. And I don't know if I've said this yet, but I have to emphasize it. We are required by law to provide those services. We have to do it. It's not optional. As you can imagine, what do you think one of the biggest expenses would be in McKinney-Vento that we have to do? It is transportation. Because it's just like what I said, if that kid has to move in and double up with Grammy who lives in Rockland, we have to transport them. And so that's why we have a McKinney-Vento van driver who is very busy providing transportation for those kids. And some of them are not just Rockland. Some of them are wicked far. Like you can't get there from your car. So, and we have to do it. It's our obligation. So I would like Nancy to talk a little bit about what she is doing in McKinney-Vento, and it's also worth your knowing that this district has been recognized by the state this year for doing an exemplary job, and that is not due to me, that is due to Nancy. And part of what Nancy has done a lot of is getting private donations, which you've seen some of in my board reports. But Nancy, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing?
Sure. It's nice to see you all. It's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces. Again, I'm Nancy Stover. This is my third year doing the McKinney-Vento coordinator part, and I work closely with Tom and before with Christina. And I am part-time. I work at the high school 1 day a week, and I visit students that are unaccompanied youth and other students that who qualify for services, touch base with them, see what they need, especially the unaccompanied youth that are either couch surfing or living in different friends' homes. We really want them to be in school. We really want them, attendance is a problem with the McKinney-Vento students, and watching some of these kids, especially at the high school, be there because they can get their meals, they're seeing their peers. Teachers are aware now of what their situation, may be aware of what their situation is. So I touch base with them to see if they need food, if they need to go to the clothing closet, if they need certain things. It's hard with high schoolers because they do need clothes. So we do provide under a supply line under McKinney-Vento. We'll go get them some new clothes if they need them. A lot of them need just sweats, or if they need a job interview, that some of them are trying to get the job. So we'll buy some new clothes for them for job interviews. But a lot of times they just need an adult that they can go to and they can trust to, if they have needs. And my biggest thing to them is like, I want you in school. We can arrange transportation. A lot of these kids too, the unaccompanied youth, they go from place to place. They may be in Rockland one night, they may be in Waldeboro one night. And so if they'll miss school, if they don't know what time the bus comes. So if they've been in Rockland for a while, then they come to Waldeboro because they're staying at a friend's house. And happened a lot last year was that there's nobody there going to school because they've either finished or they're not going anymore. And this kid really wanted to go to school, but he missed the bus. So he didn't end up going that day. So I make it clear to all the kids, call me. It doesn't matter what time, even if you get there at 9 o'clock. Call me. We'll make it happen. That Brian in the transportation department is phenomenal. I'll have to call them. If I'm working from home, I'll call them and then we'll arrange it. And we have parents and families in motels. And we have, a lot of them right now. The Travelers full, not just with our district, but with Rockland District and Camden District. They're full with students experiencing homelessness. So my job is to arrange that, transportation piece. It can change. It can be a day that's really busy and crazy all day. In one family, it can take 2 days to get transportation, depending on where they are, depending on how many students, depending on what the schools are. Also, if we're transporting to Rockland or Camden's times are different than ours, so you got to arrange all of that with timing and where people are. It takes a lot to coordinate, but we do make it happen. And Brian and Tanya, our van driver, make it happen. So we want kids in school, and that's the biggest thing for us. We've had families, and I'll throw a number for you. Last year at this time, we had 69 students. Our numbers are down this year, and they have been pretty consistently down. We have 42 students right now. This is through pre-K to 12. And I can tell you why that happened. Last year, and a few kids graduated, so we had a couple of seniors graduate, so that's always a positive. And then we had some students last year that were living with, not their legal guardian. They had to be taken from their home because of substandard housing, or parents, weren't able to care for them. So they move in with somebody, either a family member or a friend. And so they're not their legal guardian. They become McKinney-Vento because they're doubling up with somebody that's not their legal guardian. And they can't sign things for them. They can't, and the parent is not in a place where they can sign things for them. Some of these people are incarcerated. And so I can do that. Tom and I can do that. As the McKinney-Vento coordinator and liaison, we can sign for these kids to get their health benefits. I have had kids sign up for main care and food stamps. We can do that if they're unaccompanied youth and they have no one to do that. I have a form also that lets, like, if they had to go to the ER, we would sign a form from RS-40 stating that yes, they are a McKinney-Vento student and they need to be seen even without insurance. So these are all the things that, it sounds like our numbers are down, but there's a lot that happens with these kids. It takes a lot of effort, which is all worth it. Everything's worth it for these kids because they're coming to school and they're getting their goal of, finishing, whether it's elementary and going to middle school, or middle school going to high school, and eventually graduation. But some of those numbers also are down because we had families that were with people that weren't legal guardians who now have become their legal guardians, and they do have a place to live. So that has changed. We had 5 students that happened, 3 different families that they were McKinney-Vento last year, but then these people, they became legal guardians. So they had a fixed and regular and adequate nighttime residence. Those are the 3 things that we determine McKinney-Vento eligibility: fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So, and then a couple of them too, we've had families that have found a place to live. So that's been wonderful. And so there's a lot of different reasons why our numbers are down. But as we know, the way things are going now, the housing is still very difficult, and there is still a crisis for these families. And you can be a McKinney-Vento student for more than just 1 year. You qualify for the school year. So even if they find housing, their family find housing, they still stay on the list for the entire school year, because we never know what's going to happen. Their rent, they may not be able to pay their rent if they do find housing. They may have to relocate again, but they stay on the list for the entire year. So they stay ours and eligible. And then at the beginning of the year, to reevaluate to see where the living conditions are, what's going on for them, and if they still qualify. So then a new year begins. So some of them can ideally stay on the list for a while.
May I say something?
Yes.
So I'd just like to add that Nancy's role with us has been extraordinarily invaluable. To have somebody who has this knowledge that comes to us once a week. Numbers may be down, but the students that she works with can sometimes take 5 and 6 hours. They can take the whole day. And one of the biggest things is some of these students, they have so many frustrations and so many challenges that some of them may just leave on any given day. And then, and for a high school principal, it's, well, who are we going to call? We just had somebody that just left. So, and Nancy helps us with that tremendously when we're so worried about this population of students. So we are very grateful for her being with us in our school.
And I love it there. And as an elementary teacher and elementary principal, I did not have any high school experience other than with my own kids. And it has been amazing. I absolutely love being at the high school and working with these kids. And it's so important for them to feel that they have someone to check in. And that is the biggest thing. If it's not me, there's got to be somebody that can do this and check in with these kids. It's so very important.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I just really felt it was important to hear from Nancy, and we all know what's happening with the price of housing around here, and the price of food and the eggs and all of it. And it's just an area of tremendous need in its our constituents. It's what is being provided for them through Nancy's work is a lot. So that's why I'm really prioritizing it. Okay, so I'll get down into the weeds. I'll see if I can try to make this as understandable as I can. So we have a total in federal title money of just under $900,000. That's how much we're working with right now. And so in thinking about planning for a potential best case scenario of 25% reduction in Title I, that runs into the hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to reduce. So I've tried to take things out of Title I and the other titles in anticipation of reductions. So I think that kind of shows up here on the staffing page. Let me get into the ones about what that specifically is. I am proposing that we reduce the pre-K teacher at Warren. We have 2 enrollments justifies going to 1. And that one of those teachers is in Title I. So I'm proposing that we reduce that, and that will be less than we need to try to fit in Title I. I am proposing that we reduce half an interventionist from Miller, which is in Title I. There is another connected reason for that, which comes from a later proposal. I'm also proposing that we increase that person. Currently is a half-time interventionist and half-time multi-language teacher. I'll talk more about it later, but we are really understaffed in that area based on what the need is. And so I'm proposing that we make her a full-time multi-language teacher and then reduce the half-time interventionist. I am proposing that we, let's see, we currently have a kindergarten teacher in Warren who is funded by Title I. I'm proposing that we take that teaching position out of Title I and put it in the general fund, but it will be offset by a retirement in grade 3 that we would not fill. So it's basically taking a whole teacher out of Title I. Those things together account for the 25% reduction plus a little bit more. In addition to that, we have the pre-K expansion grant to deal with. So as you know, pre-K has expanded here for a number of years. And one of the first things I had to try to figure out was, they call that a pre-K expansion grant. Do we keep getting that grant if we're not expanding? And the answer is no, we do not. So if we were going to wanted to keep getting that grant, we would have to keep expanding pre-K. So we're not proposing to do that. So what that means is we are reducing 1 pre-K teacher and also 1 ed tech, the pre-K ed tech at Warren. That's what we're proposing to go from 2 classrooms to 1. That leaves 2 ed techs that are in the grant at Miller and at Prescott that we will continue to need. And so proposing that those come out of the pre-K expansion grant, which will no longer exist, and go into the general fund. And while I'm on the subject of pre-K, pre-K enrollment is now open, and the message that is going out has indicated that we will be reducing to 1 classroom at Warren. And it also indicates that, how can I put this? Students in the district can really sign up for the pre-K program in the district school of their choice, but they're only going to get transportation if it's in their hometown, with the exception of Friendship, because Friendship does not have pre-K in Friendship. So Friendship kids can get transportation to either Warren or Miller. Yes.
About the pre-K expansion grant.
Yeah.
If we are supposed to, like next year or the year after, I think, supposed to provide care for 3 to 5-year-olds, would that still fall under pre-K expansion? No.
No, that's just the thing we're going to have to do because they tell us we have to do it. There's also, Karen, help me out if I'm missing something. We have an art teacher at Friendship School. It's a half-time art teacher, but it's 40% of that half-time art teacher. So that's 0.2-time art teacher, if you do the math, is funded right now in federal title money. I'm proposing that come out of federal title money and go into the general fund because we need to have an art teacher in Friendship.
Tom, if you don't mind, I'll show the other file that shows all
That would
your
be
items in
super.
them.
Would you mind?
No, not at all. I just didn't want to like slow your roll. Plus, this is my favorite file, so I get to share. it.
I can't see it, but okay.
That's part of my whole thing.
Am I,
I'm
do
trying
you
to
see
find
Karen?
it.
I can't see it. Am I missing anything in what I've run through?
I'm trying to.
And
Get it,
Karen,
so-
what colors are those?
Next year we're going with primary colors only. I don't know, it's kind of tannish color here, which looks maybe not tan on that screen. But the lighter tan colored are all of the ones that Tom is requesting to move out of federal money, Title I and Title V into the general fund. So there's the pre-K teacher that he spoke about, or maybe he hasn't spoke about yet at
I did.
Miller, that needs to get moved into the general fund. There's an a pre-K teacher at Warren proposing to reduce kindergarten teacher, moving from Title I into the general fund, offset by a retirement. Intervention position that Tom spoke about, that will go into the general fund, but become a full-time ML teacher. McKinney-Vento driver and McKinney-Vento coordinator, otherwise known as Fancy Nancy. Art teacher is moving the 0.2 to add to the 0.3 that's already in the general fund. And the thing that Tom hasn't had a chance to talk about is EduPlanet, but Tom can speak
Yes,
about that. when
okay,
it
so
gets to-
thank you for that. So one more thing that is presently in title money, I think it's in Title V, is EduPlanet 21, which is the software that we use for curriculum. So I want to preface this by saying, I think that there is a longer conversation about where EduPlanet fits in our life. But for right now, we need to keep doing it. So EduPlanet costs $20,000 a year, and that has been in federal title money. So I'm proposing that we shift that right now. And just for context, it would be very difficult to pivot on a dime in our curriculum software. So pivoting is not something that we can't think about and talk about, and we are thinking about it and talking about it. But doing it precipitously would be extremely disruptive. So I think for the moment, we need to plan on continuing to do it. Okay, now, shall I talk about my other budget lines?
Does anybody have any questions on improvement and instruction before we go on to the next?
Well, I'm still in DOI, but I think I'm done talking about the federal money part of it.
Oh,
So in DOI, there's federal money, but then there's also local money. So I think I can talk about the local money part of it now. It's always been in local money. It's page 2 of 3. And it's the one with the yellow, it's that one right up there. Now, Karen, before I get into this, I have a question. I think that you and I talked about a few other things that aren't on my page in my binder. That when we get down to like professional educational services, just wonder if I have the most.
Yep, so when you get to your detail tab,
Yeah,
if you go to page, shows me, page 3 of 3, you'll see that there's items in a light
yes,
green,
those.
go with, that have no dollars associated with them, and those are the items that are showing up in tan on the summary page.
So when I get there, you'll help me talk that through. I'm sorry, it's just a lot with this. Okay, so
You're doing a good job. You're doing a real good job. We understand it.
that's
Yeah,
the.
you know, for an old farmer, it's quite a job to understand.
Thank you. So one of the other parts of this that I need to help folks understand is that unlike my predecessor, I have no ESSER money to work with. So a lot of things that were in ESSER beforehand, where Christina could be Santa Claus, I have to be the Grinch because I just don't have the money. But there are things that were purchased with grant money that no longer exists that really leave us with some lingering costs that we have to account for. So some of those I have to talk about now. So going all the way down here, you see professional educational services, and it says $7,500. It's on mine, it says 7,500.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, it does. Page 2.
Bottom of page 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's on page 2 and page 3. It's on page 2, it's sort of like almost near the bottom. It's the first white line. And then the detail of that is on page 3. Now, Karen, this is where you're gonna help me. So one of the things that happens with grant money up to this point is all the literacy stuff that we're doing. The Savvis, the Spire, the this, the that. So all of that stuff was paid for with either literacy grant or ESSER money, none of which exists anymore. We still have a need for ongoing costs with those things that we have imposed on the teachers. So, for example, one of the big ones is Savvis. We have had, with what we purchased with Savvis through those grants, we did get a bunch of PD that we have done this year. We have a couple of job embedded days where some Savvis trainers will come in early April to work with some of our teachers on the job, like with kids. And that's great. But some of you out there have been educators. I don't think that in good faith, we can say to the teachers, okay, it's been a year, you're now experts. So I think we need to budget for some more ongoing PD. So that's where it says Savvis ongoing PD, 3 job embedded days plus 2 online trainings. I can tell you that the cost of that item is not listed there, but it's $12,600. Where it says the EduPlanet 21 licenses and PD package, that was in Title V. That's $20,000, $20,000 per year. Again, usually paid for out of federal money. Literacy resources. So Spire is a program that is used by interventionists and special education. And we bought a bunch of stuff with Spire. Some of it is consumables like workbooks, etc. We're going to need both some more training and some more consumables. That has a cost of $20,000. There is also, you'll see M-Class training. M-Class is, for those of you who have kids in the elementary schools, is the online version of Dibbles. Dibbles is, it's a software we use for a new program that was introduced that is aligned with the science of reading. And it's just what we're using now. So I think we still have a need to keep training people, especially new people who come along. So that has a cost of $2,200.
2,200.
So Karen, am I missing anything now? And you say those are reflected in another place?
Do you want me to show that again?
Yeah, would you mind?
Sure. I guess it's 2. So here is the literacy training, which is the Savvis and the M-Class. Then right below that is the literacy for Spire. And then down here, because it was a part of a grant, it's in tan, is the EduPlanet that Tom spoke about.
So they are in there, they're just not on this page that we're looking
Because
at.
they're new items,
Right,
new items for the jump.
but they are reflected in the total amount that you're going to be considering. A couple of other things that reflect changes. I have really tried to not make changes. I'm a little conscious that I'm probably looking like the guy who wants to explode the budget, and I tell you I'm not. I'm trying to be very judicious about this. Dues and fees, that has gone up a little bit because the price, you'll see that it's for the districts ASCD, which is the American Society of Curriculum Directors membership. And then the main, what's even more useful to me, honestly, is the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association, which is my SPY network that I mentioned before. The cost of that went up. Otherwise, I did not increase any items. We have, materials for trainings and workshop days. For new teacher support, there are 3 days of new teacher support. We have administrative summer training and retreat. New teacher reading materials, pretty standard, like do a book study with the new teachers. Any questions about those before I move on? Okay. All right. Shall we talk about summer school? Some of the rest of these now go quickly.
Next up is, assessment.
Oh, let's talk about, oh yeah, it is, down at the bottom. So I have to, yes, this one has an increase again. So the increase is because we're using something new this year that we paid for out of grant money, but now we're doing this new thing with the grant money stuff. So the new thing is DIBELS, DIBELS. This is a reading assessment that's given in the elementary schools. It takes the place of like Fountas and Pinnell leveled reader kind of things. That is what we transitioned to last year, like just toward the end of last year to go into effect this year. It's part of what we paid for already, and it's just where we are now. But again, it was paid for out of the grant, and now we don't have the grant. So I feel we need to put it in the general fund. If you're curious, the COGAT, Cognitive Abilities Test, I'm on page 2 of this. That is not a change, but it was a change this year. So that is a universal screener that is given in grade 3, and it's a very standard screener for gifted and talented. So all the 3rd graders take the COGAT, and I come from a gifted and talented background, so this is a very good assessment to be using. And we catch a lot of kids to look at in greater depth when you consider they're gifted and talented. The other thing is NWEA outside of state assessment. Just so that you know what that means, the NWEA is the state test that we are required to do. The state pays for the parts that we are required to do, but it doesn't pay for additional tests that sometimes we do that we're not required to do. So occasionally there are some teachers or grade levels that may want to give the NWEA an additional time during the year or do an additional grade that doesn't typically get it. So, and that has been in the budget for a while. That's just a carryover. Anything about assessment before I go on? Sorry, what? I know. True enough.
Okay, so nobody has any questions on that? Summer school is.
All right, summer school, no changes. And I don't even know that we used all the money for this in the past, but it's good to have it in case we do need it to provide for some students who would need summer school. Am I right about that, Karen?
Actually, for a few years, we weren't using it, and then, we saw an uptick in it last year, so we increased it last year.
Okay.
So,
Does anybody have any questions about the summer school?
Is that paid as well?
I think it's just high school. It's just high school, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Other student support is tutoring. There are any number of situations when tutoring might be needed, not the least of which is if we have a kid who has a behavior that can't be in school and we need to provide some education, so we need to provide tutoring until we figure out a more permanent solution. So we need to have a budget line where there's some money available to do that. English learners. Okay, so here I am suggesting a change. And I want to start off by saying, I do know that the district isn't made of money. But I also feel I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't point out One of the things I've dug into this year is our LAW plan. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. LAW, it's named after a Supreme Court case in which it was determined that if you have kids in a public school for whom English is not their first language, we have to provide services for them. We have to provide language support services. It's something we are required to do. So we do have a multilingual teacher. She's half-time right now. The other half is as a Title I interventionist at Miller. The reason I'm proposing that that go from half-time to full-time is because we're actually woefully understaffed given the number of students we have now who are at ML. When that teacher was hired, we had about 10 students or fewer in the district. We now have closer to 20. The number of students has gone up about 2.5 times. And there are guidelines for what we are supposed to be providing those students. There's a lot of them. I won't go on and on about them, but what I will tell you is if we get a student who has a fairly profound, but doesn't really have much English at all, the guideline is they're supposed to get 2 hours a week of direct service from that teacher. And we do have some of those students. We have one right here in this school who speaks Spanish. We have one in Warren who speaks Albanian. There's a number of them. And so, and I think, I imagine, I think folks would probably agree, I foresee that this is an area that's only going to grow all the time. We are only going to have more kids in our district for whom English is not their first language. So we are required to provide some support. And then there are recommendations for the amount. I can tell you right now with a half-time teacher covering the whole district of 29 kids, we are not even close to giving those kids what they need. The biggest area where that has recently shown up, which is a requirement, is the WIDA test, W-I-D-A. That one of the things we are required to do every year is give every student who is an English language learner an assessment that tests their proficiency in English. And then the score on that determines how much service they need. It also could determine that they've grown so much in English that they don't need services anymore. So the WIDA test, that teacher has to administer that. There's a certain window of time. It was basically the month of January and February. I can tell you that during that time, Celeste, who is the teacher, she did an amazing job. She could not get to anything else. She was all over the place for 2 months doing this testing. So I just really felt, and I've tried to provide some information about this in my board reports. I felt the responsible thing, particularly given that there are also cuts to Title I that would offset this, is really to recommend at this point we go full time with the ML teacher. Any questions about that?
Are you thinking 2 people or just one?
No, just one full-time person. And Celeste, we've already, of course, talked to Celeste, and she is open to that.
So just for clarity, with this budget and the previous one, so Tom and I have talked about, any new asks are not reflected in the individual budgets. They're only on that summary sheet. So just for clarity, that teacher is not 60,000, it's 12 staff. I just wanted to understand what they're thinking.
Thank you, because I was gonna ask that, because I was looking at last year's budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gifted and talented? Not proposing major changes in gifted and talented. In fact, there's a fairly big reduction in tuition reimbursement because we will not need that next year based on the 2 teachers we had and what they told me they need. There are increases to teacher salary and benefits. I proposed a very modest increase in instructional supplies. And I have proposed what looks like a big increase by percentage in employee training and development. But if you look more closely, it's just going from $790 to $900. It's only $110. And it's because I am suggesting that we send our teachers to the VGAT conference, which is the state talent conference. And as a former GT teacher, that's a really good conference to go to, and they get a lot of bang for their buck out of that, so I did put that in the budget. Another point that is we're thinking about with GT is that a significant portion of that is reimbursable by the state. So GT, it's not the same year. I think it's always 1 year in arrears, but based on the items that we put in our budget that are labeled GT, I think it's about 57% of that comes back. It depends on how much money we get from the state. When I was in Camden, we got almost nothing back from the state for GT, but here we get a significant amount.
Correct. Next year's ED 279, we get 57% of what they deem as adequate and adequate. Is that the word they use in the ED 279 funding?
Yeah, it's
And-
not coming in.
So 57% of that, and GT is reimbursed, not dollar for dollar, but it's fairly close, maybe 15 to 20,000 less than what we spent is what they put in the ED 279, and then we get 57% of that in our state funding.
Okay.
Any questions on gifted and intended? Okay.
Okay, and then the last thing is libraries. My last opportunity to look like a cowboy for you. So I am proposing that you add an additional library media specialist, and I'd like to explain my rationale. So we have, Maine does not have a requirement for the number of library media specialists you should have in the district, other than you have to have one. So we have one serving about 1,800 kids across 7 schools. And I'm just going to tell you that that is really substandard. We're woefully understaffed in that area. And there are many studies, and I've read some of them, and I can forward things if you want, where there is a positive correlation between student achievement and well-staffed libraries in the schools. I would suggest we go from one covering the whole district. I do want you to think about that for a while. That person, how much face time with kids can that one person really provide? It is not much. And when I was a high school teacher, I taught advanced research classes. I partnered heavily with the library media specialist, who it's not just the library, she was helping me and those kids access advanced research tools, connect with databases at colleges and at the state, really learning skills that it's not just books. It's really about making it a media center. So we just aren't really able to get there with the current level of staffing. There's some other reasons too. The NEAS report has dinged us because we don't have a librarian dedicated to the high school. I should say library media specialist dedicated to the high school. There are other states that require one certified library media specialist per school. Guidelines are usually, from what I've read, you should have one certified library media specialist for every 700 to 750 kids in the district. So we're just really far behind. So I really felt I should point that out to the board, and you can take it into the bigger picture. I know we're not made of money, but it seems to be responsible for me to point out where we are. And I think I'm done.
You were gonna say what your proposal was, where there would be.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm proposing that we have one for the elementary schools and one for the middle and high school.
Just wanna make sure.
And then, yeah. And then otherwise, there are basically no changes in the library budget other than your consideration of that additional position. My hope is that in a month or so, we find out we're getting a big chunk of change from the federal government, and a lot of this stuff seems a lot more manageable.
Anybody have any questions on this part? Okay. Thank you,
Thank you for
John.
letting me take up so much time.
Oh, go ahead, Melvin.
I want to thank you, Tom. You've done a marvelous job presenting to us because it was in layman's terms. It wasn't in educational term.
Thank you. I hope it made sense.
It made a lot of sense.
It wasn't what happened.
Oh, yeah.
Um, And next up is technology.
Everyone.
What's that? At my corner, I'm maintaining the meeting over there and making sure it stays recorded and people can join, so, but I think it'll be okay. I want to start with just two major points about the technology budget. I think I said these in previous years, but our technology budget in our district covers both operational and instructional expenses. So it covers both sides of the pieces for all 7 schools, all staff and all students. So, and one thing I also wanted to point out this year, and I'll talk about some fluctuations, but generally when I look at a technology budget, I try to plan out 5 years at a time, looking at equipment that we'll need over those 5 years for both student devices or our infrastructure to have the internet and things like that, and cybersecurity now. And so what I try to do is in 1 year when one line might be up, the other line might be down. And so hopefully some of that sort of stays level. That's the goal. There's no changes to staffing in the technology budget. We have a great staff. The two major changes you'll see this year is that the technology related repairs and maintenance line is up and the computer related equipment lease line is down. And so what that attributes to is that our repairs and maintenance, we need some new switches. We're at end of life on some of our switches. We need 2 new firewalls because we have a firewall in every building to protect the network and protect the district devices. And we need a couple access points, and then we need some licensing for our network. And so the increase you see in the repairs is all related really to the infrastructure that we're going to need to purchase for next year. The other thing I want to mention though about that is we try to apply for something called E-rate funding through the federal government every school year. We put out a request for bids through this E-rate process, and companies can bid and on what we need. And then if our application is approved, which historically it always is, then we get 70% of those funds back. So what you see on the breakdown of repairs and maintenance is a combination of network equipment and maintenance contracts for a total of $73,500, and we would get 70% of that back through reimbursement or discounted pricing. The piece that's down is the computer-related equipment leases. We just finished paying off our staff lease and our student lease that we have from 3 years ago, and we're just talking about getting into one new lease next year for replacing student devices for grades 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we're trying to get to a steady replacement plan for all of our Chromebook devices across grade levels. We were able to focus on the high school last year, and it would be the 5th through 8th grade that we would be focused on next year. We have a slight increase also in dues and membership. There's been some discussion on one of my tech director membership that's currently $100, and they're talking about moving it up to $250 to be more in line with a lot of other state membership organizations. And we have a small increase in a student data privacy consortium that we belong to seek out data privacy agreements from our vendors.
Separately, I wanted to talk about some of the additions that appeared on the tier 2 list, and I think on your screen, Karen, they're in green.
Would you prefer, would you prefer I bring up the other list, Holly, or this one?
I think this one's fine. You are looking at, which line is that right there?
This one here is the video production. It's, technology related hardware.
Technology related hardware. Okay.
It's on page 3 or 4 now.
So some of my items are in tier 3, that were presented on the first night, and I just want to tell you a little bit about those and why they're there. Under technology related hardware, you're talking about a surveillance camera replacement, in the form of a lease, a 4-year lease, because we need to replace all of our surveillance cameras in our district. There was a, Cybersecurity Act passed in Maine in 2024. Public Law 2023, Chapter 681. And in that law, it specifies that the cameras that we own in our school district, which are the brand Dabla, are on a list published by the state that we can no longer have those. They were first published on an FCC, federal, what does that stand for? Federal
Communications.
Thank you, Communications Commission. They were first published over a year or two ago on their list, and then Maine passed this law, and the law said that they had to come up with a list of banned devices, and they referenced the FCC list to give us guidance in our schools. So 6 of our schools have these cameras, and we need to replace them, unfortunately. Our high school actually has a very much older system, and that just needs to be updated. So I do want to differentiate between the high school and the rest of the schools. We applied for a grant last year. The COPS grant is a federal grant for safety. I was very hopeful that I would be able to fund those cameras through a grant opportunity. Unfortunately, it's a highly competitive grant, and there were 2 districts in Maine that received that, one of those being Lewiston School District. So we're going to go for the COPS grant again for seeking some radios and various things that might support our security. But I feel like we're at the point now that Maine's passed this law that I needed to add in, but I hope by doing a 4-year lease, we might be able to at least spread those costs out over
How much
4
is
years.
that?
50,000 a year.
50,000.
For 4 years. And then the other piece on that is the possible addition of video production equipment for school board meetings. So I think it was about a year ago, I presented to the board a couple different options. And I know that it's an ongoing concern about the quality of the video, the quality of the audio. So we are putting that out there into the tier 3 requests for a portable solution that we could bring to any location that might have a meeting.
And how much is that?
That one is $50,000. It's based on a quote we got from a company, a media company, AV company, audiovisual company.
For one-time fee?
Yes. And I would think it would have a lifetime, probably at least 8 years, if, those are the types of things that last a while.
And that would be a mobile unit.
The way that's priced, right, 50,000 would be a whole case and all the equipment to be able to take from one location to the next.
Do you have any detail on what that equipment is doing?
I have a full quote. Some of that's microphones, some of it's the PTZ cameras that can focus in on people, and some of it's related to the quality of the sound, picking up the sound in the room. It's also about that sound going to the people who are at home. But I do have a full breakdown of every piece of equipment related to that.
Is there a way we can get that?
Yeah, it's an outside quote from a company, and yeah, I could absolutely supply that.
Did you present a lesser expensive option if it was always in one location?
Yes, I presented a solution if we were to keep to one location. My network admin manager, Matt Kopesky, has a little bit of experience in that, and he had put together a solution that was $11,000.
May I ask,
Go ahead.
Holly, what would be the setup time required for the mobile solution of your team?
It would be more than something we had installed in a room, right? So I don't know the exact, but we would definitely, it would be more time to set up than what we currently do. This is pretty quick, so. Okay, so those are the two in technology related hardware, correct? Yeah, but
When you were talking about 50,000, did you mean 50,000 for 4 years, so 200,000?
that's for the surveillance cameras on a lease.
So 200,000.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, okay, yeah. All right, and then the other tier 3 items, show up in the software budget. They are, thank you, Karen. They are Swank, a motion picture licensing subscription, a social media manager, and website costs. So Swank is a piece of, it's a subscription or a license that you can purchase so that when you show movies, copyrighted films, you are covered in your district. So I'll give you an example that I think our middle school might have had a movie night. This license from Swank would cover things like that so that we're not violating copyright. It also covers you if a classroom teacher is showing a documentary tied to their curriculum or a film, maybe from a book they've read. And so it has all of the licensing for school districts. And a lot of different school districts purchase this to make sure they've got that covered. This cost also includes a library of movies that teachers would be able to access, and we would have some management and sort of insight into what types of resources were being used, because it would all be contained within the system with our staff being enrolled into that system. So
And that's 4,900.
that's 4,900.
That's per year.
Yes, all these lovely software companies are on subscription models. It's great. The social media manager, one of our goals and one of my personal goals, professional goals, is to improve communication. And so the social media manager is a piece of software that allows us to have a single dashboard for every single social media entity within the district so that it can be again managed and have some oversight over that. It also helps with content creation. Students would be able to create content to go to social media, and there would be a workflow where that would go to the appropriate person to approve that, to vet that. I know Brooke Collin does a lot. We just talked about at the high school. This would be a tool that entire, Brooke's entire team of students could use, and then Brooke could vet those. And so it would simplify and improve that process so that we could get more of the message out there, more of the good story of the great things going on in the school district.
That's 3,200.
And finally, I'm proposing that we move to a website platform that is essentially an improvement over our current one. We have a website platform that is in the back end difficult for some of our users to work with. It's also difficult to parse out roles to people and to update directories and various pieces. So we're looking at potential solutions that integrate directly with Parent Square. And so again, our messaging sort of improves and is all within the same platform. We also have some federal requirements coming down the road, not until April 2027 for small districts, but there are some accessibility guidelines that are being enforced. And the way our website currently works, we can't enforce some of those things to our users who are updating our website, but the website platforms we're looking at build those accessibility pieces within them. So when a person, for example, puts an image on a website, it enforces that they add some alternative text for people who have visual disabilities. That's just an example. So So we're looking to do that, to improve that website. That cost of 10,000 is only year one. It reduces to 7,000 every year after. And that is my budget, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions?
I guess I just wonder if all of the, instructional software that is listed is really being used.
We do check usage on our software. Each year we evaluate that, and I talk with principals in their schools, and we remove things that aren't being utilized. Sometimes we can decrease the number of licenses. Other times, based on the vendor, they may not have that type of arrangement, and we just have to say goodbye to that vendor. We've done that both previous years. One of the things, we decreased math product. We had Dreambox, and we now, you'll see Freckle on here, which is half the price of that Dreambox solution we used to have. And we did remove a literacy product, but replaced it with Lexia. So there's a little give and take there with our literacy plan. But yes, we do evaluate that. And our technology committee is working on looking at screen time and usage and trying to come up with some guidelines that are specific to help, I think, which will help this whole process as well.
Okay, thank you. We're at the end of the presentations for tonight. The question I have for the committee, Julie and Steve and I have talked, starting with the next round, because we've been getting done early. How would folks feel, and this would affect administrators too, about instead of just like tonight when we got done early, if we get done early and have time, about taking one or two or more from the next week's thing and doing them? Sure. How does the board feel? So that way we're not done like 2 hours early one night and then we're cramming at the end to get all the discussion in. So we didn't want to start tonight, and we thought about the process doing this after we'd already started. So next year we'll start from the beginning. But I just wanted to say how everybody felt about that. So, go ahead.
I think that's a great idea with that. I remember last week we talked about setting up a time to discuss whatever it was you said. I can't remember.
The board meeting, because that's going to be on the,
Board agenda.
the redistricting. Is that what you would?
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be on the next board agenda.
Okay, all right.
So, anything else? Okay, go ahead.
Would that potentially move up the approved the proposed budget to earlier, or you're still planning that for the 31st?
I'm thinking it will still be the 31st, but if we can start the discussion the previous week, we're not trying to cram it all in one
Yeah.
meeting. I mean, it'd be great if we got it done, a week early, but I'm guessing. No.
Just curious, because I know I'm not gonna be
No.
here that day.
I don't think we have enough discussion at the end of these. We always wind up cramming down, and we have 45 minutes here to discuss the entire 5 presentations and try to come up with. I think last year, we
I
just
think
kept going and going.
Yeah.
So, yes, if we can make that March 31, that'd be great.
Yeah, so, okay, we will do that, so,
Can I
go ahead.
just want to ask the board if there's any additional information that any of you are thinking you might like. If you could either let me know now or send me an email. Ms. Wilcox? I'm hoping you'll actually stop and let me out of the car versus tuck and roll.
No, you're probably a goldfish, man. I was curious, and I don't know if Ryan's here, but
He's not.
of one of the options to move some kids from Miller to Friendship. Miller has ACE, Friendship does not. If a child that needs to utilize the ACE program at Miller gets moved to Friendship, could the bus bring that kid back to Miller for ACE?
Okay, I'll ask that question. I'll find out.
Can I also comment on that? We looked into getting ACE at Friendship this year. We have some parents that definitely would like it. We have the 15 kids and then we could add it to our school. So if kids if that were to happen, redistricting kids from Miller and needed ACE, we have the potential of putting it in place in Friendship. We get enough students.
Anybody have any other questions before we recess?
Yeah, so any other data requests or anything you think you might want from me, either ask me now or shoot me an email and I'll try to have it available for the whole board by next meeting.
Okay, it is 8:01. We are recessed until next week.